Hello everyone, you are listening to yourradio.com with DJ Sakara, and today we have a very special interview with a very special guest, and it is my great pleasure to actually have an interview with none other than MrTact today, and we're going to have, to help me with this interview actually, we're going to have DJ Viceroy, as usual, and another special guest, Talanithus from UOLS, who will be handling a lot of the questions from IRC channel. So if you want to ask some questions to Mr. Tact or make comments, you can do so by joining us in our IRC channel. All the details are on our website, www.yourradio.com. And we will be more than happy to pass along some of the questions you have for our guest today. So, without further ado, hello, Mr. Tact.
Hi there.
How you doing?
I'm all right.
Well, actually, before it's part of the questions I have for you, and I think quite a few people wonder about that one too. How did you come by the name of Mr. Tact?
Well, so I do get asked this question a lot, actually, and the short version of the long story is that when I started working at OSI, I was sort of the brash and outspoken young fellow, and I had this habit of standing up in company meetings and asking the questions that were on everyone's mind, but no one really had the nerve to ask, of people like, our VP of studios and whatnot. And so we did at Origin these sort of gag holiday, or at our end of the year team meeting, we would do these gag awards, and I got, the first year I was there, I got the award for most tactful questioner. And a couple years later, I get invited to join the development team, and I had a standard nick that I used for a lot of different things that was completely inappropriate for being, for public use on a development team. And Synth, who was the community relations manager at the time, came to me and was like, "Oh, I need to get you an account on the boards, and you need to give me your nick." And I'm like, and I saw this thing sitting on my desk. I said, "Oh, Mr. Tact, that seems appropriate." So that's the whole story right there in a nutshell.
So basically, for being the one that dared ask a question that no one else did, but asking them so that you didn't actually get in trouble.
I don't know how I didn't get in trouble, quite frankly, because I wasn't really all that tactful. It was a completely ironic. It was a completely ironic nickname.
Well, that worked. And before we talk about your career in Euro, and God knows there's a gazillion questions on that front, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself, the man behind the developer? What do you do when you're not Mr. Tact?
Oh, God. Actually, I'm Mr. Tact all the time, quite honestly. So the way that people, I heard this story that I think it was Viceroy that was telling me the other day. Like, he'll talk to people, and they're completely different than he would expect from what they write on the boards and whatnot. Yeah, there's no veneer here at all. I'm the same person all the time. With my kids, with my wife, with the people I work with, it's all the same. So, same sort of mildly sarcastic, humorous, that's me. So, in that respect, I'm not ever not me. But, so when I'm not working, I do play a lot of games, obviously. I play a ton of games. I bike quite a bit. I think I mentioned this on my blog some time ago that I am now biking to work, and that's quite the experience. Do I do anything else? I do fun stuff with my family, like we go to amusement parks and whatnot. In fact, right before the interview, I was out front of my house playing catch with my kids. So there you go.
And what games do you play? Do you play mostly computer games or console games as well?
Yeah, I play both of those actually. I have a lot of different interests in terms of genre. I like sneaker type games a lot, like Splinter Cell. I played all those. Oh, I haven't played the newest one yet. I've been really busy, so I haven't played Chaos Theory yet. But I play some first-person shooters. I do play a little bit of online, multiplayer type type games. Been playing a bit of Battlefield 2, as you may imagine. And then on the console side, I just bought a PS2 a few months ago. I haven't had one, the entire life of that product. Never really felt obliged because I have a GameCube, and almost all the products that I wanted to play came out on GameCube as well as PS2 until Katamari Damacy. And I went out and bought a PS2 so I could play Katamari. And since then, I've played a couple of other games on PS2 that I've missed out on, like Burnout 3 or Burnout 2. Wait, one of those Burnouts. Whichever one is not the one that's about to be released. And what did I just finish playing? Psychonauts. Really fun game, by the way. If any of you haven't played it yet, go get it because those poor guys. Oh. Anyway, there you go. And I have a tendency to say there you go a lot.
When you say those poor guys, is that to imply that it's not selling as well as it could or should?
My understanding is it didn't sell really, really well. And it's a product by Tim Schafer, who used to be at LucasArts, who did Grim Fandango, and I don't want to muck up his CV, but I know that he did Grim Fandango, and he did a couple of the other adventure games that they're really famous for. But he's just a really brilliant guy. And I was reading in the newest Game Developer magazine, they did a postmortem, and they went through hell and back to make this game. And they were talking about, the really crappy office space they had in downtown San Francisco with, dead bodies in the street and whatnot. So, yeah, and it's a terrific game, and I really enjoyed it. It's very fun. The Black Velvet level, in and of itself, is worth playing the game for, I think.
Oh, wow. Well, I did love Grim Fandango. Played that game a while ago. It was a great game. Now, you mentioned quite a number of games, but I did not hear you mention UO. I hope you do play Ultima Online.
I kind of thought that was implicit. Sorry. Yeah, I play UO.
Yeah, and which shard?
I mostly play on Legends. And the reason is that Legends opened up right before I actually joined the dev team. And I was working at the time as part of the, what we call at EA now, the platform group. Supports a lot of the core infrastructure for doing an MMO that are not actually part of the game, like the billing and stuff like that. And back when that was all owned by Austin, I was the manager of that team, and I had a couple guys working for me. And little dirty secret here, they opened up the Legends shard, and it was only available to people who were from AOL, unless you happen to be a developer. Because you get on there and play on that shard from inside of EA, right? So we all went and made characters on Legends, and that's where we all played a lot.
Okay, and actually, the next question, I guess, would be, what inspired you to make a career in game development?
Temporary insanity. It's kind of funny. If you talk to anybody who's been in the industry for a really long time, there's this certain world weariness that you get from those people. And I remember this from back in the day when I was a young, wide-eyed, innocent, wanting to work in the game industry. It takes a certain amount of obsession, quite honestly. Because most of the people who are working in the game industry, with the exception of people whose skills are very, very focused on game development, like designers, most of those people could be making more money and working less hours working in some other industry. So you really have to love making games. And that's kind of what drove me to it as well. I've always been peripherally involved in games. I always made, had sort of a hobby, sideline thing that I did where I would always make games, and many of them were really, really bad, like, knockoffs of role-playing games and stuff like that. Tabletop role-playing games like D&D, that kind of thing. And worked for a little while as a game journalist, and that kind of gave me a little bit of an overview of what the industry was like. And then, I moved down to Austin, and after working at Dell for a couple of years, I had the opportunity to go work at Origin, and I seized the chance.
So that was going to be my next question, which was, how did you come about working for Ultima Online for Electronic Arts? Did that just pop up or something? Did you suddenly find a job offer and you went for it, or? how did you get there?
Well, I worked for Dell for a number of years. I was actually one of the founding members of their internet team. It's my big claim to fame until I came to UO, right? And I left Dell to go work for a internet consulting firm, and they did not do very well. It was during the heyday of the .com era, and they sort of arose around the time that we sort of hit the peak of the .com era and we're starting on the downslope. And I was there for about a year. And while I was working there, the Austin office, it was a national agency. It was US Web, by the way, who later became US Web CKS, and then became March 1st, and then became delisted from the NASDAQ, and then ceased to be a company. But I was there when they were US Web, and there was a sort of a nationwide mandate for a while that each studio or each office was going to have their own sort of concentration. So like the LA office was really, they had a lot of connections with the film industry and stuff like that, so they were really good at doing films and whatnot, marketing to film companies and so on and so forth. And I thought that maybe our concentration could be games, because that was something I was really interested in. Some of the other guys in the office were really interested in. And so I contacted these folks. It was a company called Tornado Alley, which was formed by a guy named Mike McShaffrey, who is an ex-Originite. And they were developing an MMO that was oriented to kids. And I contacted them saying, hey, I'm interested in taking our company in this direction, and we're wondering if there's any kinds of marketing type resources you might need, because we do that on a contract basis. And they were really interested, and they were like, yeah, that's really cool. And as it turned out, their company, they had some mishaps, and their company fell through. But I remained kind of good friends with him and his wife, Robin, who was also an ex-Originite. And then she, along with another friend of theirs who was a former Origin person, started a consulting firm that placed people in the games industry. And while I kept contacting them about stuff like how do I build this center of competence in my internet marketing company over here to do game stuff. And finally, one day, Robin just said to me, look, if you want to be in the games industry, why don't you go be in the games industry? So I gave her my resume, and a position opened up at Origin, which was a C++ programmer, database programmer, hybrid type role, which happened to be what I was doing a lot of. It just happened to be very well suited to my skill set. And she called me up one day and said, hey, there's this job that I think you'd be perfect for. Why don't you just, get off the pot, go interview for it? And I did, and they hired me, and the rest, as they say, is history.
And what was it like when you first got there, the first few days working there? Was it what you expected? Was it better? Was it worse? Or was it totally different?
What was it like the first few days when I got there? Well, so I parked the Flintstone mobile next to the Brontosaurus. So it was a long time ago. I don't really remember very well what I do, actually. I was fairly amazed. We had this meeting room called the Mosh Pit at Origin, and Richard Garriott had all these arcade machines that he had bought, I want to say like 30 or 40 of them. And they were just lining the walls of this giant meeting room. It was just a big open room. There was a lot of furniture stored there for some reason, if I remember correctly. But I remember being there and saying, give me something to do. And they'd go, okay, here, do this. And I would do it, and it would take me like an hour to do. And then I'd come back and go, give me something to do. And they'd go, let me think about it. So I'd spend a lot of time wandering the building and trying to kind of get a feel for things. I wasn't in product development when I first got there. I think I mentioned that. So my job there really wasn't all that different than the jobs I'd had before. It was only really when I got to the dev team that it started to feel like working for a game company.
Okay. Well, there were all those arcade machines you could spend some time with, if nothing else. But so basically, you started out in Austin, right? And So were you among the staff? Well, not were you. It's pretty much safe to say that you were among those that moved from Austin to Redwood. Um,
Yep.
Do you miss Austin?
Yep. Yeah, I do. I really do. There's no barbecue out here. There's no Alamo Draft House. There's a lot of things about Austin that I miss quite a bit. And obviously, not to mention, all the people that we knew back there. That was kind of tough, moving out here and then not knowing anybody except for the people I moved out here with.
But it's getting better now, isn't it?
Well, I don't know if you heard this, but a lot of those people left, so I'm kind of in the same boat.
Yeah. Well, I hope you're not saying that you're thinking about bailing too, but yeah, quite a few people left, and we were very miserable about it. I know I'm still missing LaRoche big time, but what can you do?
Yeah, they had to kind of do what they felt was necessary, and that's the biggest thing. It's quite disappointing to go into work every day and be like, well, who am I going to have lunch with today? Because all the people you used to have lunch with are now somewhere else.
I feel you on this one. For a while there, you had been given a very elite title. You were called MrTact, the Man of Mystery. Since then, your title has changed, but can you tell us what your responsibilities are for Ultima Online, and what would be your current official title?
My current official title is actually what I use on Stratix, which is designer/programmer. So I'm the only person on the live team right now who has designer in their title. So I end up doing pretty much all the design work for all the stuff that the live team does. So the last few publishes, the Evil Furniture, that was I won't say I did all the design work because a lot of the initial concept came out of a sort of a brainstorming meeting between me and the programmers and the lead, not the leads, but the senior people like Lady Lou and Aaron Cohen, who's our marketing guy. We all kind of got into a room and said, okay, we want to do a promotion where, we're going to give away some stuff and then we'll make them available for sale. And what are we going to do? And we came up with this theme of doing Evil Furniture and whatnot. But I was the one who actually did all of the, nitty-gritty design work and figuring out all the sound stuff and all that kind of thing. And then I do a lot of implementation work as well. For a while there, it was pretty much just me and Evil Mantis, so it was a two-man show doing all the implementation of stuff. But then we just hired somebody. I think you might have seen her posting on the boards. And but I'm still doing quite a bit of implementation. And I do a little bit also of live support, which, for those of you who are not familiar with how to run a live service, basically boils down to watching for things to go wrong and then diagnosing them and then fixing them and getting them back up and running. So there you go.
Okay, and so, well, that's actually quite a few things that you're doing. But if you were to describe a typical day at work for you, what would it entitle?
So honestly, I don't really have a typical day at work. My job is extremely, what's the word I want to use? It's mutable. That's a good word. It's not quite where I'm going, but yeah, chaotic. That's a little more in the right line. I have a plan usually when I come into work. I have, some design work to do, or if we're past the design phase, then I have some implementation work to do. But a lot of times, I get these little crises that pop up during the course of the day, right? Where I mentioned the live support thing, and that'll at times can completely derail your day. You'll be working on some stuff, and then somebody will come over and go, hey, Lake Superior just crashed, and we don't know why, and we have to go look and figure it out and do a little bit of forensic analysis and try to figure out whether it was sort of a one-off type of situation, maybe a hard drive filled up and we couldn't write log file or backup files anymore, or whether it's something like a code issue that could recur and we need to figure out why and make sure that we fix that bug, since we're not real fond of crasher bugs. But where was I going with this thought? I guess that's it. I seem to have lost my train of thought on that, but that's a pretty good summation of what my day is like. I know what I was going to say. I was going to mention, so I'm like the most senior guy on the development team right now, with the exception of Stormwind, who has been around since Hector was a pup, as they say. He was I think he was one of the original UO developers, and he's kind of a lurker. He doesn't really get out and talk to the community or anything. And actually he's still back in Austin. So I'm the guy in Redwood Shores where people have a tendency to like come to my office and go, hey, how does this work? And I have to tell them, or I have to tell them I've never touched that code, so I have no idea. Good luck.
Okay. Well, and that's basically their ticket to say go bother somebody else, because I don't.
Yeah, there's really not a lot of other peoples for them to bother. So did I just say peoples? Oh my God. Yeah, there's not a lot of other people for them to bother. So I'm pretty much the first tier support. You got your usual tech support structure. You've got your second tier people, and then I'm pretty much the last line of defense on that. So.
Okay. So I guess at that point it's pretty much, well, whatever happens, happens. But I do want to ask you, what else do you do? Actually, no, that's not what I want to ask you at all. What I want to ask you is, what would you consider as your contribution to the world of Ultima Online? Like Ferdbert had designed the Raider map. What do you consider your baby?
See, that's a very broad question for me, because I've kind of had my fingers in a lot of different pies, and a lot of things under the hood, a lot of infrastructural things that you guys never really get to see. Things like the way we used to start up a shard, we used to have a bunch of different configuration files that were scattered across all the different machines, right? And Speedman and I would constantly talk about this, and I was like, hey, I did a syntax for a unified config file that would just be on the one box, and what that does is it makes our service a lot more maintained, which means we can spend more time devoting to actually fixing bugs and doing development of the game, as opposed to wrestling with the hardware or wrestling with the infrastructure. I've done a lot of that kind of stuff. Some specific things that I did, let's see. I pretty much ran the team that did character transfer, so if any of you like character transfer, then I guess that would be something that I would consider my baby. Here's one thing that I was really happy with. I think it was the end of 2003, I spent about a month going through all the drag and drop code and fixing a whole bunch of exploits that people had been getting screwed by for a really long time, and so that was very satisfying. I think we pretty much shut the lid on those kinds of exploits, which was really good. I've worked on a lot of stuff. I've worked on pretty much everything that is in the game nowadays. I probably touched it in some small way.
I guess that's probably where you get the greatest satisfaction in the end. It's like all these little things. And I think that's probably what so many people don't realize. They only see, the final product, but they don't see all the other work that was involved to actually get there.
Yeah. Oh, I just thought of one other thing. If any of you like the new quest system that's in ML, I designed the quest system, and Evil Mantis did the implementation, so I'll take credit for that one. Woohoo!
Awesome. And when you started as a dev member, did you have like a personal goal? Did you have this grand plan of what you were going to do with the game?
I really didn't start to develop that until after I'd been working on the product for a while, actually. The product. Sorry, marketing speak there. I apologize. After I'd been working on UO for a while, periodically, when you're working on UO, and I think any other developer who's worked on UO who came to the game after being a player, which I want to be upfront and say that I'm not a person who was a UO player before I came and worked on UO. I actually started out in the MMO universe playing Asheron's Call, and I was actually still playing Asheron's Call when I first started at Origin. I don't remember if I still was when I went to work on UO. But in any case, after you've been working on UO for a while, periodically what happens is you hit these things, and you find these things in code, and you're like, oh my God, that's just idiocy. Why did somebody do that way? And then you root that out, and you hopefully refactor it and make it work a little better. And so a grand master plan, not so much. More like a long series of tactical plans.
Okay. And you were saying that you were playing Ashron's Call and until you basically started on UO. And I guess the question would be, how long have you been playing UO?
Well, I started when I first came to Origin, so off and on. So I've been playing off and on for, what is it? So I actually just turned 6 at Origin. So about 5 or 6 years.
And, the game is very often referred to as a world. To you personally, do you really see it as a world, and a world in the sense of built of various societies and communities and whatnot? Or to you, is it more like, a game or a cool job or just a combination of all three?
So I definitely think that UO is a world. Honestly, I think if it wasn't, it would not be here anymore. Because certainly there have been a bunch of other MMOs that have come out since UO started that have been more polished or, had more up-to-date artwork. We've all talked about that kind of stuff. And I really think that it is the virtual world aspect of UO and the communities that are built around it that really have kept it going since it's been around. So to me, fostering that kind of stuff is really important.
But to you, what was kind of, I guess, the wow factor in UO? What kind of made you, or what makes you, or if anything, consider this game so different from other games and keeps you coming back to it? Besides the fact that it's your job,
housing, I think, is the first thing that stands out. I mean, I think UO's housing is more interesting and obviously it's more customizable than any other housing solution that any other product has done before or since, right? So, and I think that's a big part of why people get invested in UO and they spend all this time building their house and doing all this cool stuff and collecting all these cool items, and that's why they stay. That's part of why they stay. Yeah, what was the question again? So I can make sure that I'm actually
to you, what is the wow factor and what makes it so, I guess, a unique game, and what keeps you coming back to that game? Beyond the fact that, in your case, you're a developer, but, as a player of the game itself.
So I got to be honest, I don't think I'm at the level of being a UO player that most of the UO players are. Because I came to the game, it wasn't my initial experience with an MMO. And I was already working on, not directly on the game, but I was working for Origin, when I started playing UO. So I don't think it's really possible for me to have the level of devotion and dedication that, to it as a game that a lot of people who play the game do. Ironically, I think that's actually good for me because what it means is that I don't have sort of prejudices that I bring to the table. And the few that I do, they sort of get slapped down, as we saw recently with the whole being in combat mode and attacking people. Let's not even talk about that. But so one of the things that really keeps me going, quite honestly, about and enthusiastic about working on UO is really the community. And I'll be frank and say that there are definitely days when I'm like, I'm not reading the boards today, because if I do, I'm going to put a bullet through this monitor. But by and large, here's the thing. People don't get this worked up about stuff unless they really care about it, and the fact that so many people care about UO is fairly awe-inspiring. So that's really my driving factor, is to kind of try to understand what the UO players want out of the game and help the game evolve in that direction. I think I'm going to finish there before I say something and get myself in trouble.
Fair enough. But yeah, I can definitely understand where you're coming from as far as the forums are concerned. Sometimes I just read them and go like, my goodness, if I was a developer right now reading this, I would want to slaughter a bunch of people just because, oh God. It was, we were actually having a field day, when was it, 2 days ago, when the login servers were acting up, and we started reading some of the posts on Stratix, and he was like, good God, like, people were acting as if the end of the world was upon us because they couldn't get in the game for a couple of hours. And I was like, oh, man.
But see, that's the level of intensity and the level of devotion that people have to this, to UO, you know. And much though sometimes it's a little, what's a nice word to put it? It gets under your skin a little bit. You know, I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for those people. So, you know, you have to respect that. What's really funny is, though, there's so many moving parts to this service. People just don't understand. I mean, there are literally hundreds, if not in the thousands, of different things that have to work together in order for the service to actually exist. And, you know, any little thing that can go wrong could potentially bring the service down or you know, or disrupt service for some people and things like that. And not all of them are under our control. Some of them are like, you know, like with network issues, sometimes we have to kind of go to the providers and go, can you fix your peering between Sprint and AT&T because, you know, we're losing, you know, 80% of our packets between those 2 points. You know, and we can't make them do that. They don't work for us, right? But you know, we do our best. And you know, sometimes it's funny because we'll have all kinds of different weird things. Like this past couple of weeks, since the ML launch, we've had like 3 different things break on us that are some of, you know, like the network thing that caused the login server outage. We couldn't get to the login servers from inside of EA. So, you know, not a network outage that was under our control, but we have a network operations team that you know, talks to the people at Sprint or whatever and got that fixed. So, I don't know what my point is to that. I'm just ranting, I guess. So, there you have it.
Okay, but actually, if I can stray a little bit from the line of questions, since we're on that whole forum thing and you know, problems occurring and you know, so many different people being involved trying to resolve the problem, and sometimes it takes a while before you can get to the root of the problem and fix it. But and I don't really know if you can answer that question because it's probably not really up your alley, but sometimes it's just the way, I guess, that some of these problems are handled that are really baffling to the players. Because I'm thinking about a number of incidents where there was a problem, like XBomb. For instance, take the beta codes when they were being distributed. And the first day that the beta codes were supposed to come out, they were supposed to come out at a certain hour, and for whatever reason, they were not made available at that time. And it took, I think, 2, 3, or 4 hours even before the codes were actually made available. And for 4 hours, you know how the boards get. If you're like 10 minutes late, people start flipping out. 30 minutes, oh my God, and 1 hour, it's like the end of the world is upon us. And through the entire time, despite like flames and flames and flames, there were absolutely no communications from EA. And that got people even more upset. And sometimes, I know personally, I wonder, why not? Why not just say something? Even if you don't have the answer, why not just say, yes, we are aware of the problem. We're working on it. Very often that alone would calm people. But not even that is done, and it just makes people go like, why?
Well, that is a pretty broad question, and a lot of it does touch on a lot of things that are not really in my domain. But I will say that one of the things you asked me earlier, like what I thought some of my legacy with UO would be, you know, to put it that way. And I think one of the things that I brought to this job is when it's within my power to say, hey, here's the problem, I like to think that I've tried to make an effort to do so. And I think that by doing so, I've kind of helps foster a culture of doing that within the dev team. As far as the broader communications picture, I really can't address that because I'm not a communications guy. So I apologize, but that's kind of where I got to be with that answer.
It's fine. I figured you probably wouldn't be able to answer it, but it has been a question that I've been wondering so many times about. And the only reason, I guess, I was saying this is because I know when personally I organize events, if for some reason I'm late in starting the event, sometimes just dropping by the castle telling people, guys, I'm working on it. It's going to be like maybe 10 minutes. Usually that's more than enough, and people are like happy and and they don't mind even if it takes 30 minutes in the long run. But I guess when if and when we get the pleasure of interviewing somebody from communications team, then maybe we can give them a third degree about that. But onto something that is more actually something that you can definitely answer. If you could be anything in the game, because right now we have the elves, but if you could be any kind of creature, monster, or an NPC even, what would you like to be? And I'm not talking about what is currently possible to be, but what would you like to be if it was possible?
The whimsical questions. That's always good. It's an interesting question. I'm not sure I have a really cogent answer. I think my favorite creatures in the games are golems, as you'll find out shortly. I think they're really cool. I kind of dig on that whole steampunk vibe, and I'd like to do more with them. So I guess my nice safe answer would be if I could be anything in the game, I'd be a golem. But I would have a lot more cooler abilities than we currently give our golems in the game.
Now, you just said something that now you got me really curious. Why will I find out shortly that you like golems so much? Is that one of those hint, and I'm not telling you anything further, so is that like a tease?
Yeah, it pretty much is.
And you have no shame saying it.
Yeah, not at all. So don't get all worked up over it because it's not like this giant thing. It's nowhere near what I'd like to do with golems in our game, and I do definitely have some ideas about that I would love to see come to fruition someday. But I did get a little something in terms of modifying the golem loot drop that I think is kind of fun and interesting for an upcoming publish.
Yeah, awesome. We'll definitely know to look for that. And as far as templates go, which one would you consider your favorite?
So I know this is going to come as a huge shock, but I actually like archers. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. I mentioned earlier that I was playing in Asheron's Call, right? And the archers in Asheron's Call just owned for a very long time. And then, of course, I came and started playing UO, and at the time, archers were severely gimped. And I was like, what the? But anyway. So I still like archers quite a bit.
So are you the one that we should? Are you the one we should blame? Are you the one archers should thank? Because I will not use the word blame for them being so unbelievably, ridiculously overpowered.
So here's an interesting phenomenon. Back in the day, archers used to really own, and then they got nerfed, and then they couldn't really do much of anything. And then we fixed the thing that nerfed them, and amazingly enough, now they own again. So was I responsible for fixing that particular problem? I don't think, honestly, I am, although I was kind of a driver for getting the movement bug, the movement issue fixed. I definitely think that there might be some balance issues there, but that's going to be something that we're going to try to address through a more sweeping a look at the game as a whole, hopefully, so that, archers have their ability, but it's not like, archers are not inherently better or worse than other templates. That's my goal anyway. That's where I'd like us to be.
Because I have to say, and this is really just me, Sakara, talking, because as you can guess, I really do not like archers right now, and I just feel that with the new expansion, they were given even more love than I think they deserved. But it's kind of like, whoa.
Well, yeah, they have kind of the same damage over time as a Dexter, and they don't have to be next to you to do it. So what's it's obviously not balanced, in my opinion. So there you go. There's my official opinion. How do you like that?
Well, I'll take that. And I'm actually getting some serious flames myself. They think I'm too much of a fangirl. That even though I do not approve of the archer. I'm sorry, I'm just getting like some serious flames here, but I will survive. Next question for you. What is your I guess favorite playstyle? Since you like the archers, am I to assume that you like stealth that you stealth around killing people?
No. I'm not playing a stealth archer at the moment. I'm more of a straight up. I'm mostly more of a PVM person historically. But I will say this: I did play WoW for a while when it first came out, and a lot of the UO devs and various other people around the company were playing it, and a bunch of them formed a guild on a PvP shard, and so that kind of pushed me into having to do more PvP, and I kind of started to get an idea of what all the PvPers were talking about all these years about, oh, look, PvP, the AI that that EA can't code, whatever. But yeah, I understand that sort of thrill now, and I'm trying to get into more of that since I'm supposedly going to be doing some PvP balancing, and it would be appropriate for me to know what the hell I'm talking about when I do that.
But you do have a number of people that on the dev team that actually do play those various templates, though.
We do, and we have a couple people who in QA who play who are, kind of our yardstick. They're the ones who we go to them and we're like, hey, we're going to do this with archers, and what's going to happen to archery? Because they play a lot more than we do, and they play a lot of different archetypes than we do. So yes.
And, I think that's something you have been working on for a while, but this is one of the questions that we had for you, which was, is there really any real way to balance the effects of PvP, the impact on PvP after each expansion, with all the goodies that come in? Because from, what we've experienced, you pretty much have an expansion almost every year, and that doesn't give you much time to tweak with with all the new stuff that comes in and the new skills, the way they affect PvP and whatnot. So is there any real way to go about this?
If you're asking me, are we strapped for resources, the answer is yes, but we make do with what we have, and fortunately we've kind of been given the go ahead to invest some time in rebalancing everything, and I say that I keep talking about it, and anytime anybody asks me what I want to do during a particular publish, I tell them that's what it is, and sorry, losing my train of thought there. What it really comes down to is to a certain extent, those of us at the level that I'm at, we don't have a lot of choice in our own destiny, right? There are people who decide we're going to do an expansion, and they just say to us, go do an expansion. And we have X amount of time to do it, and we do the best with that expansion that we possibly can. And sometimes that proves a bit of a challenge in terms of integrating PvP into that. And so the answer to your question is, I have no idea. The answer to your question is yes. It's a big challenge for us to keep PvP balanced with the expansions that we do. But I think we have an awareness of that issue that we didn't really have maybe a year or two ago. And I think we're spending a lot more time thinking about that now than we have historically on UO. There, how's that for a good, safe answer?
That works. Even though I'm probably going to get flamed again for saying that works, but that's fine. And what are the bugs that you're aware of and that you guys are currently working on? And, you know, I know that you guys usually don't like talking about current bugs because you don't want to give too much info that people could exploit or take advantage of. But is there anything you can actually tell us about some of the bugs that you're aware of and working on?
Yeah, there is a bit of that element. I'm trying to think if there's two fairly significant bugs that I know that I have fixed for the publish that's coming after ML, and I remember what one of them is. I can't remember what the other one is, and the one that I can remember is not something that I should really tell you about, unfortunately. But the other reason why we don't really like to talk about bugs very much, honestly, is because the minute we say something's a bug, people start paging the GMs to get them to fix it, and that's not really the desired effect. The desired effect of telling people that something's a bug is so they go, oh, okay, that's a bug, and now I don't have to post 8 times a week about it. They know it's there. They know it's a bug. Personally, I wish we could be a little bit more upfront with with how openly we work on the bugs that we do. But again, that's something that's not really in my control. So there you have it.
Okay, I have another question for you. And this one, we're actually moving towards something a little different. And it's, what do you think about player-run shards? And what is EA's stance on it?
So that's actually a very easy question to answer. EA's stance on player-run shards is that we don't talk about them, unfortunately. So that's really all I can say. I mean, we know that they're out there. We acknowledge that they're out there, and that's about the extent of our public discussion about them.
Fair enough. Actually, I would like to know more about it, but I do understand if you can't, you can't. So I guess that's life. But on a different topic, well, it's not totally different, but kind of. Is there any chance that we will ever have a true 3D client for Ultima Online? I know that Lady Lou kind of said that it was not in the current plans, that you guys were just looking at mostly improving the 2D art, but is there any hope whatsoever?
I think there's always hope. The thing you got to remember about UO historically, and this is from somebody who's been on the team for quite some time, is that our plans change like every 6 months. So, because we're constantly shifting and trying to pay attention to what the community wants and things like that. So will it ever happen? I don't know. Personally, I think it would be great if it did, but I'm not in charge of that decision, and so I don't know where we are with that decision right now. So there you have it. That's my personal take on the situation.
Okay, because we had talked a little earlier about the art in UO, and there was this really huge thread on Stratix regarding the art challenge, and there were quite a few people that had been asking, and I know I had asked the question myself, why do you guys not consider hiring some of the people that had been posting all those really nifty designs they had made for replacement art, and that they had posted on the websites? Why could you not use these ones or consider hiring them to do that for EA?
So I really don't think there would be a way for us to use player-created art for legal reasons. I think we would have to make a pretty significant effort to get some kind of program in place to do that, and I don't really see that happening, quite honestly. As far as hiring those people, they haven't really applied for a job, so we can't exactly hire them unless they come to us and say, hey, we'd like you to hire us. It's not the kind of thing where we're going to go out and actively recruit those people. And from what I understand, from what we were talking about earlier, I think somebody mentioned that one of them is like 17 and the other one is living in the UK and doesn't want to move. So, that's kind of our situation with those guys.
Well, yeah, that would definitely be a problem. But basically, if people were to apply, though, because I think you were mentioning there is also a problem with the fact that you're running few clients as far as skills go for people doing the design, the art design.
Right. So not necessarily from an artistic perspective, but from a technical perspective, the people who actually have those skills of making 3D art and making it in such a way that when you render it out as 2D tiles, it looks good, that's actually kind of a lost art, actually. The vast majority of people who are coming out of art schools today, they want to be working on 3D stuff because, that's where the majority of the industry is right now. Not just in the games industry, but also things like CGI animation effects for movies and stuff like that. You can't go and do 2D tile art for UO and then put that on your resume and then go try to get a job at Pixar. So to a certain extent, working with an older client sort of impedes us in that way, and it actually kind of holds us back a little bit in terms of hiring client developers as well. Client developers want to be working on the newest, coolest 3D engine, right? So these are some interesting challenges that you don't see a lot of people talking about on the boards because they're not really visible to the folks who play the game.
I'm so sorry.
Did you fall asleep?
No, oh my God, not a chance in hell. I'm just murdering somebody. But besides that, I'm definitely there. But no, it's really, I just think that a lot of people don't really realize because, like I said, when we were discussing this earlier, personally, there was quite a few things that I was not aware of. Not only what you just mentioned regarding the 3D art, but also, the fact that some of the people that had been creating this art were not able to actually either didn't wish to work there or were not yet of age to do so. But also, a lot of people very often will criticize about a lot of the things that they see or would like and do not see happening. And I don't think that they even want to know why it doesn't work or they're not getting what they want. They're just like, I'm not getting what I want, so I'm not happy, period. And I think as far as the art goes, it is something that a lot of people have been wanting to see change in for a long time. I know I do too. But it does put things in perspective when basically with all the information that you have just given us regarding this.
So honestly, I agree with you. I do think that players of UO should not really be concerned about how the process works. Ideally, if we do our jobs, then all you guys should see is the end product, and it should be completely irrelevant to you, all these little elements of what it takes, what goes into actually producing the game. On the flip side of that, like 90% of the bitching that goes on U-Haul is the pat response from us is pretty much, you guys actually don't understand the process that's going on to do this, and there are complexities and issues that you're not aware of that are, some of them are kind of insoluble problems because it's like you tweak something one way and it breaks something else. And I know we've talked a little bit about that kind of stuff, but I honestly I don't want to delve down to that level. I don't want us to be to a point where we're saying that's the cause, we can't fix it, and that's that. We try really, really hard to find the most optimal solution where you guys get the best possible result, and so you don't have to care about what it takes to get Gump art in the game or something like that.
But at the same time, isn't it a good thing? Well, I can kind of understand where you're coming from, where you're saying that we shouldn't even have to know about what the limitations or problems can be. But at the same time, sharing that with us, like you have done a number of times, also I think helps probably the people that are not so die hard on complaining about everything and anything, but then, the other people, it actually, for them, understanding what the problem is makes it easier to deal with some of the things that may be bothering them.
Yeah, I can see that, but on the other hand, it seems a little bit like a cop-out. I mean, this is our job. We get paid to do this, right? We're supposed to be professionals. We're supposed to know what we're doing. And when we come out and go, wow, this is really, really hard, we sound like idiots, right? And the reality is it is pretty hard because a lot of times you're dealing with things that are part of a legacy code base that's 8 years old that in some cases was not necessarily engineered in the best possible way because the game was made to last for 6 months and be thrown away. So I don't know. Is that an answer? I don't know, or is it just more ranting on my part? I don't know.
Actually, it is.
But I don't know where I'm going with this thought. I guess I'll leave it at that.
That's good. But I do have another question for you, and I guess I'm going to sound a little noobish on this one because, until I had seen that question, it never even occurred to me. And this one is saying, do you think we might ever see an Ultima Online client developed for Macintosh users? And frankly, I didn't even realize there was no client for Mac.
There aren't a lot of products out there that support Mac, actually. Blizzard's obviously the exception. I don't remember if they started out as a Mac shop but I think pretty much every product they've developed has been both PC and Mac. But they're the exception, not the rule. The reality is that with the market share of Mac OS as it is, the business reality is that developing for that platform just isn't cost effective. Now, personally, I'm of a mind that doing cross-platform development is a good move because it does cost you incrementally on top of your core development, your core platform. But what you reap from that is sort of a constraint that forces you to engage in really good engineering practices so you can port cleanly, and you reap a lot of benefits from that in terms of long-term maintainability and whatnot. But I'm not convinced that my point is such that it still justifies the investment. I kind of think it does, but then again, I haven't ever actually done it and proven it, so it's hard for me to argue that with people. They go, show me how it works. And I go, well, it works in my brain.
Okay. So basically, people from that play with Mac should basically not hold their breath.
I hate to use terms like that because they seem so final, but honestly, I think if we were going to ever have a Mac client, we would have had it by now.
Probably, because we are going on 8 years now. So now a totally different topic. Actually, no. Before I go to that one, since we're in hardware and stuff like that, what kind of hardware are the servers?
Computer hardware. There are limits. There are limits to what I can actually tell you because we're getting into some sort of sensitive stuff. But it's just commodity hardware, quite frankly. It's just PCs running Linux, and that's about all I will tell you.
Okay. I know when I've been asked to move on to a different question, so I will. And this one is something that touches me a bit more because I organize events, and I know that there's a number of players on every shard that organize events for their community. But, as events organizers, we're very limited in what we can do due to game mechanics. And are you guys considering at any point in time to, provide us players with better tools to actually organize these events? I know we don't get much support from EM. We know we don't get, EMs are very limited in what they're allowed to do, but, there's a number of things that could be done to actually help us run events, because, for instance, we can't log down anything in the wild. It has to be in a house. It has to be, we can't have NPCs that have scripts or any other such thing. So is this something that you guys are looking at or would consider doing?
Are you talking about EMs, or are you talking about just players in the community, players in the who run events?
For players, because we already have the EM program, and they have very strict rules that they have to follow. But I'm talking about as us normal players that organize events for our communities. are you guys planning on giving us tools to help us organize our own events?
So when I saw this question on the advanced list of questions that I got provided for this interview, I was like, oh, that's a brilliant idea. How come it's the first time I've ever seen this? So so the answer to your question is, I think that would be something that we'd certainly be interested in discussing. We do build tools for our EM group, and probably not at a rate that makes them happy. I don't know if any of the EMs are listening, nodding their heads right now. But yeah, I mean, anything that helps build community, and I mean, I mentioned earlier that I think that one of the great strengths of UO is the community. Obviously, that's something that we want to feed into. So anything we can do that will help that, we can look into getting on a development schedule.
Well, then I'll definitely will have to send you more details about that whole NPC actor thing, because I think a lot of people organizing things in game. That's one of the main reasons so many get discouraged down the road, because there's so many limitations on the stuff that we could possibly do, and it's definitely helping getting the communities closer together.
Yeah, I think that particular issue is something we'd have to talk about in great depth, because anything that we let you do that could potentially bring down the shard and affect everybody else who's playing on it is something that we want to be extremely leery about. Yeah, I mean, I think we should talk about that more.
And as far as role players are concerned, I think role players kind of, I can't say that they got the shaft per se, even though when seers were removed, it seems to me that a lot of the role-playing towns kind of slowly fell apart. Are there any plans in the future to do more for role players, and especially for Player Around Town, and give them, I don't know, special goodies where they can actually be a real town? I know that back when we had Sears, some of them would provide stables and working stables and other such things for the more developed player towns. Are there any plans to kind of, encourage people building player-run towns like that again and developing our RP community?
So player-run towns is actually a feature that comes around periodically, and I don't know whether it'll actually come around at a time when we opt to make that the focus of an expansion or something like that. But that is a feature that we, from a development standpoint, putting in things like where you could put a stable in your house or something like that. I think that would be really cool. There aren't any concrete plans to do anything like that now, but certainly, we'd like to be made aware of the community's interest level and that kind of stuff. Is that more interesting than fixing factions? I don't know. These are the kinds of decisions that we have to weigh when we decide what we're going to work on, right? So by all means, if there's tons of people out there listening right now who are like, yeah, hell yes, I want player-run towns, let us know.
Yeah, you might be sorry you said that. You might get flooded with PMs, but it's a good thing, because I do think that player-run towns, especially when you look at certain player-run towns like Paxlayer, I'm still blown away by Paxlayer. I think they have an awesome town. And there were so many before that used to be amazing, and they're now all but dead. I think something could be done there. I'm going to have to cut down on some of the questions, because I do have quite a few other questions for you, and there's a lot of questions being asked in IRC, and I'm going to have to pass the mic to Talanitas so that he can ask them to you. So I'm going to go ahead with, this one is more of a general question people are curious about. And it's, do you guys actually pay for your Ultima Online accounts, or is this a benefit that you get and it's just a free account? Because I seem to recall that counselors had their accounts paid for like 25 years or something.
That doesn't sound right to me. But those of us who actually work internal to the company, they do comp our accounts. And in fact, I actually have several accounts that I use for testing and whatnot. But that would just be ridiculous. Yes, we're going to have you work on this game, and oh, by the way, when you're going to need to buy your own account to log in. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I figured it was something like that. Um, and the other question, actually, this one is more related to us. I think most people are really happy about the tokens because that resolved so many scam issues. And people are asking, is there a chance that we're going to see tokens for game time codes as well and the name change service?
So I actually already posted something on the boards about, I think, honestly, you will see name change tokens and probably gender change tokens. I hate to say time frames, but because I'm usually wrong. But I would guess there is a reasonable chance that you will see those happen before the end of the calendar year because they're relatively easy to do. And they're a great revenue opportunity for us, and so that combination right there is sort of a no-brainer. As far as game time codes and stuff like that in the game, I'm a little more sketchy on that because so when you're doing stuff like name change or items that occur in game and things like that, the domain is very localized to within on the shard. So we just write code that happens on the shard, and then poof, the magic occurs, and you have your stuff. With the game time stuff, we'd have to do a lot of work integrating with our billing system and stuff like that, and that kind of infrastructure doesn't exist, and it's kind of large, and it's tricky, and has the potential to screw up a whole bunch of stuff in a very nasty way if we don't get it right, which means it's going to end up taking a long time to build and then a long time to test. So I would probably not count on being able to get game time in the game in token form anytime soon. Again, it kind of depends on how much of a hue and cry there is for it, but there isn't a huge hue and cry for it right now as far as I know. Certainly not as much as people begging for name change tokens.
So I guess that would also apply to account upgrades as well. So since this would also be going through billing, or would?
Exactly.
Okay. So, but you did mention gender change. I'm blown away. I did not realize that gender change was also in the works.
In the works might be overstating the case a little, but I know we've talked about it, and the conversation has basically gone, hey, these would be really easy to do. We should get them on the schedule. That's the extent of where we are right now with that stuff. But gender change, God, we get so many requests from people for gender changes. It's just mind-boggling. So, we should do those.
Well, amen to that, because my very first account was started by my brother, and, he made a bunch of male characters on it, and it doesn't work for me. But I have a question. Actually, it's not me. Viceroy has a question he would like to ask you. So go ahead, Vice.
Yes, I got a question about the 90 days and 30-day token, idea and everything. I was actually wondering, since it can't be, basically integrated together or combined together, is there any way we can possibly have it verified to where we can actually, test the validity of a code, to make sure it's actually a good code or something like that, to where we can, kind of, put it in the safeguards, just like you would with something like through a website or something like that along those lines if it can't be done in-game. Can we have something like that maybe?
That is an interesting question. I'm thinking there are certain reputable brokers that you can buy your game time codes from where that's almost a moot point. And then if you're buying them from somebody else, it's more or less a crapshoot. So I'm not really sure how valuable that would be. And if we were going to spend the time to do that, I would almost rather just make it possible to buy them in-game. I mean, I'd almost rather spend the time to hook them up to, because it's quite a bit of work either way. Well, I'm speculating on the fly here, and that's always a bad idea. It probably would be less work to do it like through a website, but I don't know. It's an interesting idea. It should definitely, you guys should definitely keep bringing that up if that's something you're really interested in. Honestly, I don't have a good feel. I'm not really at a level where I'm privy to the kind of metrics and stuff that we run on the service. So I don't really know how many people are actually buying game time with in-game assets. So that'd be a really interesting thing to find out.
Well, the only thing is I know personally I sell a bunch of codes, and so if there was some kind of system in-game for example, I'll give you an example. 79 codes the last month alone for in-game gold. That's a lot of money. But, I was just thinking, if there was some way that we could actually check and make sure it would definitely be great for the brokers and actually maybe encourage sales, because when we get shafted, that also hurts EA in the long run. That's how I'm looking at it. And if you don't have the specific answers, do you know of anybody who might have the answer, more of an answer to that very question?
And I'm sure they'd love me for putting their head right on the chopping block. So, like I said, it's an interesting question, and it seems like it bears further discussion, and that's about all I can say right now.
All right, thank you.
Alrighty. I guess I'm down to the last two questions, and then I'm gonna have Kalanithis give you the third degree from our fellow players. And the first one is, I have a feeling what you're gonna say already, but this is a question a lot of people ask, and is, what was that secret project?
If I told you, it wouldn't be a secret anymore, right? Right. Yeah, I really can't talk about that in too much detail, honestly. EA hasn't opted to say anything about it, so I would kind of be in breach of my agreement with EA to do so. And I kind of like my job, so I'd like to keep it. So, sorry.
I figured we would probably get something like that, so fair enough. But the last question I would have for you now, it would be, where do you see UO in a year or two or 5 years from now? You know how it is. Every time one of the dev members leave, all of a sudden everybody's like screaming, "Oh my God, apocalypse now! Armageddon is upon us," and this and that. And every time there's a new expansion that people don't like, or that are things in it that have people unhappy, they're like, these are the last days of UO. I've been hearing this for the past 5 years, and UO is still very much here. And so where do you see it in a few years from now?
So the real interesting thing about whenever people leave is, yeah, it's really bad to lose experienced people. And that's very frustrating, and it's tough for us personally because these are our friends who are, moving sometimes to other parts of the state or across the country, and we don't really get to spend any time with them again. On the other hand, of course, we're spending a lot of time with them on AIM, which is exactly like it was when they were in the office, so, arguably that nets out to zero. But the thing that you don't think about when this happens is it's an opportunity to give a chance to somebody who wants to be in the gaming industry, and specifically people who are real big UO fans. That's been a huge consideration for us as we're going through and interviewing people and trying to backfill some of these folks who have left. We just hired a new designer, in fact, who's going to start in a couple of weeks, who's a really big UO fan, and we're very excited about having him on board. You should be hearing more about that as he puts in his appearance, hopefully. But yeah, I think any predictions that people have made in the past about the demise of UO have been consistently proven wrong. So I'd really like to not be in that company. I will say that I'm not really sure what's going to happen with UO. We've had some really fascinating discussions internally about what to do with UO, including probably every crazy suggestion you've ever heard. Why doesn't I can't even tell you because, again, I'd be getting myself in trouble. But all the crazy things that you guys think about in terms of why don't we do this with UO, we've probably talked about, and how feasible it would be and how much it would cost and where it would put the product and so on and so forth. So I think that UO is still going to be here. I don't think that's really in question, quite honestly. And I couldn't even begin to fathom what it's going to look like because we have all these people coming on board who we're recruiting out of the community who are going to come in with with an agenda to do certain things to the game to make it better, which, I think it's going to continue to get better. I know there's some issues that people have with the state of the game design, but from a service standpoint, people complain about downtimes and stuff nowadays, and I have to laugh. I have to laugh because when I started on UO, And it wasn't even the worst situation ever for you. I mean, publish days were like a nightmare, and they would literally take all day because of the tools we had at our disposal, and chances were good, after the publish, we'd immediately have to do another publish to fix whatever was causing all the shards to crash, because our testing processes were not as evolved as they are now. I mean, now, we can publish the entire service in a matter of hours because we've improved our tools, and the game is the most stable it's ever been. In fact, I don't know if you guys know this, we actually have, I want to say, the best uptime metrics of any MMO product. People complain about the shards being down and stuff, but they don't realize. Go ahead. I'm kind of rambling at this point.
No, go ahead. I was just going like, wow, I was not aware of that at all.
Yeah, I think if you actually look at the entire service and the number of, so WoW might beat us on sheer volume at this point, but I know it was true, a few months ago. But, if you look at the entire service and how much our shards are down as a total percentage of the uptime of the entire collection of all shards, it's pretty minuscule.
That's actually pretty impressive, but I do have to concur that, aside from that other day the login servers that were flipping out, overall, we really couldn't be complaining much, except, I guess, as a player, what I would probably complain the most about would be the amount of litter in Heartwood and the occasional lag spikes, but aside from that, connectivity is fairly good.
Are there not trash cans in Heartwood?
As far as I know, I haven't seen any.
Okay, well,
I know people
something we need to, sounds like something we need to remedy. That sounds like an oversight.
Definitely, because it's pretty bad. But on this happy note, I'm going to hush now because time is flying, and there are really lots and lots and lots of questions from the players. So I'm going to... Actually, I think Viceroy wants to ask you something, and then I'm going to pass the mic to Thelonithus. So, Vice, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I quickly wanted to, touch base with you on something which you've been discussing up on the forums and everything. Basically, and I think it's something that needs to be brought up during this interview, which I know we're running out of time and everything. So if you could quickly throw out there what your plans are to do with regards to Siege Perilous and stuff like that. Could you quickly, share what your upcoming plans, on how to deal with Siege Perilous, or what ideals you have in mind for Siege Perilous? Could you maybe touch on that for a little bit?
Are you sure you don't want me to answer an easier question, like how to solve world hunger or cure cancer?
I'm not sure.
So we definitely want to get the PBD thing ironed out. That, as far as I know, is the only concrete plan we have for Siege right now. Everything else, I mean, that's kind of the huge monkey on the back of all development teams with regards to Siege for the last couple of years anyway, right? So once we get that ironed out, then we can go, and then we can kind of think about what's the next step. I know that we've talked internally about Siege, and even though the population is quite small relative to the other shards, which frankly is why Siege has not gotten the attention that it's needed for the last couple of years, I think the attitude internally now has sort of come around to more of, yeah, it's a small population, but these are our really hardcore, very vocal players who, are really dedicated, and they consistently indicate that they're planning to stick around longer than most of the people who are playing on, the tramelized shards, so if I can use that term and not get shot. So I think that they're definitely higher on our radar, to use yet another term that you guys love. I think they're higher on our radar than they used to be, but I don't know what, if anything, we have concretely planned beyond PBDs. I'm definitely not touching the Heartwood Sanctuary Reds question because I had no involvement in that, and I don't really know what the answer is, so don't even ask me. And that's about it.
All right, I do appreciate you answering the question. Is there anything else that you might be looking at in which you might want to also share with the listeners out there, or touch on it that you're also considering in regards to production shards? And also, just want to quickly point out, me personally, I would play on Siege, but I don't play on it because it's more of a trammelized, I'm seeing it, for example, you mentioned Sanctuary and everything. I just feel like that's further trammelization of Siege Perilous, and that's one reason I will not play on Siege Perilous. If it wasn't for that, if it was just one facet and everything else, I know we already got what we got now, and that isn't going to change. But if people in the EA are wondering why, that's probably why. I'm just throwing that out there. Nothing. It's a little off topic. But is there anything else that you might be considering or thinking of on production shards that you might want to touch on as well?
Yeah, not so much. We have some publishes coming up, and we've been talking. Obviously one that we're working on for the next publish after ML. But other than that, beyond that, we don't even really have any concrete plans at the moment for anything. And I'm not going to tell you anything that's in the publish just yet. So I guess that's pretty much the whole gamut.
All right, I appreciate it once again. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Telanithus. We got about 34 minutes left. Hopefully we can get a lot of these questions answered. I know some of these questions are probably out of your realm. So once again, if you don't have the answer to the question, just let us know, and we'll go ahead into the next question. Go ahead, Telanithus.
All right, we'll go ahead and start off with some of the PvP questions, the most popular being, of course, are we ever going to see the possibility of a pre-AOS or pre-Renaissance shard?
I think that we have consistently said no to that, and I think that would be the official party line. My personal thought is, like I said before, I've been on this product for a long time, and our strategies change pretty regularly. So if it's something you guys really want, I don't think I would give up crusading for it, but I definitely know it's not in the cards for right now.
Sketchy of the Moonglow Town Council on Atlantic would like to know, why aren't factions being fixed? Is it just a point of them not being used enough?
Yeah, that's kind of a chicken and egg question, right? It's like, oh, well, factions kind of sucks, so we should fix that. But nobody's playing it. Well, nobody plays it because it sucks. I think part of it is, and I'll be honest here, is that a lot of the people who used to be more involved in factions are not on the team anymore. And that's why it's kind of not been on the radar lately. Although I will say, I have been taking a little bit of an interest in factions, and I think I would like to see us fix it. We had some plans a while back to do a pretty significant retooling of factions, but we had to kind of cut that for time, unfortunately. I know that you guys hate to hear that, and of course I'm going to get killed from both parties, both sides of the fence here for saying that. But that's kind of what happens. I definitely think that once PvP rebalancing has occurred, we need to start thinking about, well, what's the next thing for PvP? Is it adding a new type of PvP game to the game, or is it fixing the capture the flag style gameplay that we have right now? Who knows? I think we definitely need to do something though.
Well, speaking of the balancing PvP that you've mentioned both on the threads and within this own interview, we have a few questions, and I'll list 3 of them right now, and you can deal with them either in bulk or separately. Manny would like to know, is there a balance coming for archers? And he states that right now they're just ridiculous and they're overpowering. Secondly, we have System asking, when are we going to see the balancing that was promised a month ago? So do we actually have a time frame on when we're actually going to begin the PvP balance? And last is from Ryu, who wants to specifically cite that the Elven Sight, or the ability to passively detect hidden, is making ninjas' lives quite complicated and downright impossible at times. Stealth archers are not as hard to hit, but a few friends of mine, including myself, are stealth melayers, and it's not possible to fight elves and tricky to fight other PCs in PvP. Any clues or hints on if this is going to change in the PvP rebalance pass?
So let me answer questions 1 and 3 at the same time here. Archers are part of UO. Stealth and Reveal are part of UO. And the plan is to rebalance UO. So hopefully if I have the time to do what I'm hoping to do, those things will be addressed. And I think that part of the problem here is that we have, since the game launched, we haven't had the opportunity to go back and look at the whole thing as a kind of a smorgasbord, right? As an entire body of work that interacts. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to do. Now, it's sort of my plan. It's not officially on the schedule yet, but it is probably the highest priority on my list of things to do. So, as far as the second question is concerned, I think I just mentioned it's not officially on the schedule. My intent was to kind of put up a PvP server test center and let people start testing stuff and start doing changes, and then we would have the changes done, and then at that point it would be just a matter of, hey, we need to roll these into a publish. The scope of what I'm hoping to do is looking a little more vast at this point, so may have to get some more official sign-off on that and get that officially onto a schedule. But like I said, I've been talking about doing it for some time. We only postponed it because it got so late in the day that it really didn't make any sense to go balance a bunch of stuff and then have ML come in and introduce a bunch of new stuff and completely unbalance everything again. So it's pretty high on my priority list to get to doing this as soon as possible. It's definitely not going to be in this next publish right after ML. That's mostly going to be bug fixes and then a couple of small features that we've been working on. As far as when it's going to happen, I can't really say at this point.
Well, moving off of PvP, we've got two questions, both from Graypon and Shylessa Seedler. Both are asking about the virtue system. Is it ever going to get finished? And Shylessa actually had an interesting recommendation of perhaps making one of the virtues allow people to gain points by picking up the trash that people live around the banks and Heartwood and whatnot.
That's an interesting idea. All right, so here's a little something that we've talked about internally that is not on the schedule. It's we all want to finish the virtue system. We're all like, oh, this is such a black eye for it to be out there and only half of the virtues out there. It's really an insult to the Ultima name, quite frankly. You shouldn't be an Ultima product and not have the virtues out there because it's core to the Ultima name. However, the other thing, the flip side of that, is that we all feel that the virtues as they're currently implemented are not, they don't really hew very well to the history of Ultima. So we've actually talked about ripping out all the virtues that are in there and then implementing a system that's more like, well, we've talked about using the new quest engine, right? Where it's like, okay, here's an example. You've got Ben the peasant who's out there and he's been poaching on his lord's land, and you can go find him, and maybe you can hunt him down and capture him or kill him, and then that gives you points in the virtue of justice. Or you can give him a bunch of food or give him a bunch of money so he can afford to feed his family, and that will give you points in the virtue of compassion. Much like the way the virtues actually worked in the Ultima games, instead of being, magical special abilities, which is currently what they are, which I don't think really fits into that mold very well. I don't know how people would feel about that. I think if we did that, we'd have to find a way to reintroduce those abilities as maybe like skill-based abilities or something. But because people losing their ability to sack res and sneak through giant spawns to recover their corpses in the new ML dungeons, I think would really, really upset some people. So anyway, there's my answer on that question. Those questions.
Well, you mentioned the quest system, which previously you actually posted as being one of your own brainchildren. And now that you're a member of the live team, are we going to see the quest system work to a point where the event moderators can use it within their own events? And within that same vein, the old Brit invasion that was worked on by Furpert and LaRoshan, is that ever going to see a retooling to the point where event moderators can use that within their events as well?
So I don't know if we have any plans to make that stuff available to the EMs. Probably they would like us to, and probably there will be discussion on that front. There are some interesting technical challenges around that I can't really go into at this point, both because they're technical and because they're sort of, trade secrets type thing. I don't know. Anyway, but I will say that part of the reason we did a quest system was because we'd like to build on it. So I'd like to hope that we'll see more with the quest system, whether through the EMs or not, I can't really say. And as far as the advanced spawner and the invasion stuff, we're just dying to do another invasion and build on the things that we learned from the previous one. But again, that's not on the official schedule at the moment yet, although we talk about it constantly.
All right, we have some questions that deal specifically with some of the skills. Ole is asking, will we ever have the ability to enhance hats so that they can compete with leather or steel helmets, which can be enhanced?
That's a really interesting game design point. One of the things that bugs me about the game currently, honestly, is that there's really not a huge amount of difference between wearing plate and wearing leather, except, of course, usually leather's lighter. I think we've kind of lost that sort of distinction between different types of equipment. And on the one hand, there's two fields. What's the word I'm looking for? Two schools of thought on this topic, right? One of them is that you should be able to wear whatever you want because that's a way to allow you to customize your character, and you shouldn't be constrained by, if you want to have, say, let's say a helm that has 10% or higher resistance values, you shouldn't be constrained to having to wear plate, right? And the other camp, of course, is that metal armor is significantly better than leather armor historically, and it doesn't make sense, particularly from a class distinction standpoint, right? Like when you've got mages running around in medieval plate or whatever. How are they any different than a warrior, except, of course, they can throw firebolts and whatnot, fireballs and whatnot, e-bolts. Confusing my brain for a second there. So I'm not really sure which camp I fall into on that subject. Both of them have really good points. I think I would like to see more distinction for the different classes of characters, different types of templates, in terms of how they can equip themselves visually, but it's a significant disadvantage to not be able to have the level of resists with a hat that you can have with a helm. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question right now. Obviously, it's something that I've spent some time thinking about, but I haven't arrived at a conclusion. And I think that it warrants further discussion. I know that's sort of an ambiguous answer, but it's the most honest answer I have right now. Sorry.
If you were to come across with some sort of skill rebuild there that would allow more diversification within armor and clothing and whatnot, would that also be tied into a crafting revamp that would allow crafters much more choice in how they develop their armor to actually build specific resist suits or suits that were specifically oriented for a particular archetype and player character? Because as the system stands now, when people build their suits, it's pretty much luck of the draw on what they get on their runics, or for a quest item, or for a bod reward item, or what they find in monster loot and something that actually happens to survive enhancing.
Yeah, so that's actually something that I think I've mentioned in my giant crafting revamp discussion, which made so many people happy and irritated so many others. I would like to see craft people to be able to, because here's the problem with our crafting system right now, right? You can't make a piece of armor. You can't make anything. You can't make anything that is distinct from something somebody else made, okay? Like, if you look at crafting in the real world, although we don't call it crafting necessarily, but if you look at, like, the difference between a Stradivarius and another brand of a violin, right? There's a distinction there that applies to the Stradivarius brand. I don't even know what those are, but I can tell you that exists. And because everything in our game, all the suits of armor that are made of the same material that have the same resists are essentially the same item. It's really hard to distinguish yourself as a crafter in a way that's consistent with the way crafters have distinguished themselves in the real world. So I would love to see us get to a point where we can do more of that, where you can find a way to make a certain type of piece that only you could make, and it has your name on it, and there's meaning to being a crafter, as opposed to just being a Walmart, more or less, where you only have to buy something once at that. it's a challenging problem, and I don't know if or when we're going to solve that. As far as doing skills is another thing where I would like to see us build on what we have now and make it so people can distinguish themselves further. I mean, right now you get, two templates, and they're more or less going to be the same. We say that with a skill-based game, you can choose any of a wide variety of skills, and you have this unique combination that creates your character, right? But the reality is what we have now is we have a tendency to fall into certain templates. That's why we even use the word template, right? So there's really not that much of a distinction. I don't think we're as bad off as certain other online games where every character looks the same except for their talents, but I don't think that we're pushing that envelope as hard as we really need to be, and I think it's one of the truly unique things about UO that we could do more with.
Actually, now that we're talking about the crafting and all that, there is one question I would like to ask you, and this is regarding the new expansion. I know a lot of the crafters were happy that they were given the possibility to craft almost artifact level, artifact quality items, but in reality, when you look at it, even though they do have the ability to craft it, it's still more up to the hunters and not so much the crafters, since 90% of the ingredients cannot be obtained by a mule. They definitely need to be obtained by a high-level hunter. And so are there any plans to actually have something that is really 100% for crafters, obtainable and craftable by crafters, uniquely by crafters, and not through hunters?
I would not do that, quite honestly. I actually think that situation is a good one, and it's comparable to what I would have liked to do with the crafting revamp. And a lot of crafters are going to throw their hands up in the air and roll their eyes and go, oh, God, why would you make me suffer to have to rely on these PvM players who are going to go out and hunt for stuff and sell it to me? And, my response to that is, so what you're saying is you want the hunters to be completely dependent on you and you not to be completely dependent on the hunters in return. To me, that is making that sort of interdependency is what having an MMO is about. It's about creating these relationships through the game design where you're having to interact with other players. It really sucks for people who want to be solo players, but on the other hand, we could do some things with the way that you buy and sell stuff right now that would make that a little less of an inconvenience. The vendor system, I think I've mentioned this as well. The vendor system is really cool because it allows you to. It's kind of like customizing your house, right? You put your vendor out and you customize them, and you can have have them dressed uniquely, and you have a unique combination of your wares on them. The problem is it's not as good an interface from the buyer perspective, right? If you look at and compare that to something like an auction house type environment like some of the other games do, it's much more convenient to be able to go to one interface and then search and find the one thing that you really want than to have to recall around to go to all these different vendors and ask them for, see if they happen to have the one thing that you're looking for. There's some other things too, like you could set up contractual relationships in game. This is one of the things that I've talked about, or thought about at least, that we could do for crafters, where it's like, okay, I'm going to put a bounty out and get me, X amount of this craftable material, and it's like doing a bod for a hunter, right? And then, the bod is fulfilled and the materials go to the crafter. So the short answer to your question is no, I don't think it's a bad thing. I actually think it's a really good thing. But on the other hand, I definitely think there's some room for improvement in terms of how those interactions occur.
I'll agree with you on that one too. That interdependency within the community is one of the things that UO has been moving away from over the years. So to see that building back in is actually a positive sign in my estimation. But while we're working on the same sort of crafting issue, Sarsmi has a question. Despite the incessant whining of the 1% of the UO population that posts on U-Haul, is it possible that we might someday see item decay implemented?
So I'm kind of veering away from item decay as a means of taking items out of circulation, only because the very implication of it, it's kind of like the whole permadeath discussion. I don't know if you guys have ever really been, maybe some of you are, you kind of want to be game designers or what have you, and There's some communities out there of people who work on MMOs, and there's this perennial discussion about how permadeath and what a great feature this is. And and most people just recoil in horror at the notion of permadeath. I'm not a fan of permadeath, by the way. This is the notion that your character can die and lose everything you've accumulated up to that point ever. Some of them, they kind of try to gloss over it. They're like, oh, you can die, but then you get reincarnated. I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know. But anyway, so to an extent, in an item-based game like UO really is now, having items decay and break and go away is kind of like a form of permadeath, right? These are items that people have spent some time and energy investing in recovering, whether they farmed them, hunted them, they traded for them, bought them off eBay, what have you. And there's an investment there. There's an emotional, in some cases, of an actual financial investment. There's an investment of time, what have you. And to cause that stuff to go away is actually taking that stuff away from people, right? It's invalidating that investment. So, and that's going to piss some people off. However, on the to contrast that, I really do believe that unless items go away on a regular basis, crafting is meaningless, especially in a game as mature as UO, where pretty much everything's out there to just be picked up off the ground. Maybe that's overstating the case a little bit, but it's not. There's a germ of truth there. What I'm kind of leaning toward now, as a sort of compromise solution, is having items decay and then become useless, and then have to be repaired, and then having a incrementally greater expense in terms of repairing them. So, for example, in the hypothetical crafting thing that I did a couple months ago, instead, you would use, I think you'd use powder of temperament. Oh, it's called powder fortification now, isn't it? Yeah, powder fortification to repair an item that had been depleted down to, no uses or whatever. And then each time you do that, maybe increasing the number of charges of powder fortification that you have to use to do the repair, or increase it by 1 or double it or something. Find some ratio there, where at some point it's going to be more cost effective for you to just go buy a new one. And also in the meantime, there's still an incentive there for crafters to do bods and whatnot to get powder fortification, because now there's much more need for it. And by the way, if I take repair deeds out of the game, which I definitely would like to do, sorry to those of you who like solo playing, but I would like it so that you have to go to a town, find somebody who's a craftsman playing, and say, hey, please fix my stuff. And, of course, provide you a secure way of doing that so they can't steal your stuff. If I do that, now there's something that's interesting, worthwhile gameplay for the crafters to stick around, and a reason for them to continue to do bods and so on and so forth. So there you go.
I think the other side of that coin is right now, as the crafting profession sits, even with the implementation of these craftable artifacts and whatnot, they still can't compete when it comes to monster loot or actual artifacts and whatnot in the production of suits that are actually usable by the large bulk of the constituency. So if you create a system whereby the crafters are required to be more involved within the community, but you don't give them the ability to actually give a service that is needed by that community, aren't you biting yourself in the foot?
We might very well be shooting ourselves in the foot. I don't know about biting ourselves. But, yeah. So this goes back to what I was talking about. Yes, I mock you. This goes back to what I was talking about earlier with crafters being able to distinguish themselves, right, and do something that's interesting and unique. There's a couple ways that we were looking at solving this problem. One is to reduce the stuff that's available through loot a little. I don't know. It's a possibility. Some other possibilities. So there's other ways to go about this. We've talked about introducing new item properties that can only be added through crafting. So if you want, a piece of armor with property X on it, you have to get a crafter to make it for you. You can't ever get it from a loot drop. These are some possibilities. We're definitely exploring these kinds of ideas, and certainly if anybody has any thoughts on these things, by all means, put them up on U-Haul. Don't put them on don't put them in Spiels and Rants. I almost said Spiels and Rants. Well, and I wouldn't put them in the Ideas Den either, honestly, because we don't read the Ideas Den that much. I hate to say it, and some people are going to be aghast that I actually came out and said that, but a lot of the times the ideas we see on Ideas Den are the same things we're talking about internally. So there's no huge upside for us there, and It's more of a place for players to talk about ideas, realistically. And I've gone way off on a tangent at this point, so I'll shut up.
Well, while we're talking about crafting, let's do a little bit of a switch over to the gold sync that was implemented with the collections. And Anonymous Coward has a question. Awesome job with EM with Mundane's Legacy, but I kind of feel the collections are suffering because of the decision to raise the gold price and lower the intensities on all items. Is this something that the live team will be looking at, or do you know if there are any plans to rotate the collection prizes so that it might help create a secondary market for them? The current system seems to be really favoring resources over gold.
So it's a really interesting question. I say that a lot, but yeah. So I didn't really have a whole lot to do with the collections, and I'm going to constrain myself here in answering so that I don't completely, make something up that's completely wrong. I do think that the collections are an interesting way to introduce new, unique items into the game, and it's possible that we could look at that in the future. I don't know that we have any plans to. I mean, the expansion just came out, right? So we're not really looking at, how can we, retool this feature so it's better. We're like, hey, let's let it run for a little while and see what people's reaction is to it. Not just the immediate reaction that we get from, a certain percentage of the population, but, more of a broader overview of how people respond to this. But yeah, stuff like, the minor artifacts that are given out by in Ilshanar now, the artifacts you get from Doom, the these kinds of means of doing loot drops. It would be cool if we could rotate the stuff that gets dropped by those periodically to kind of keep it fresh, keep the existing items that they were dropping, kind of keep their value up a little bit, and keep people interested in doing it. However, as I so often say, in terms of concrete plans right now, not so much.
Well, on the topic of gold sinks, Riot would like to know, are there any plans for true gold sinks? For example, the possibility of renting some of the unused houses in towns. It was talked about a long time ago, about 3+ years ago. But my question is, what would have to happen to make this happen? I mean, are there coding changes that are extremely involved to allow people to take possessive ownership of the static houses that are available within the towns now?
Yeah, I don't know. Is that something that we really would consider? I don't know. It doesn't really seem like it's worth the time to me, honestly, because you can have a house in the game. You just, place a plot, build your house, you have a house. I don't really see a need for us to provide another avenue for you to have a dwelling of your own. And and I could be wrong, and I'm probably going to hear see a huge backlash from this statement. But I'd like to find, I'd rather invest that time in doing something newer and cooler with housing, the housing that's already in the game, than trying to find some other way to do that. People talk about gold sinks. I'm not sure we need gold sinks all that badly. And part of that, obviously we don't have the kinds of metrics that we'd like to have in terms of how much gold goes in and out of the game. Something we always talk about, adding to the game so we can monitor the economy and stuff like that. But, on the other hand, I'm not sure any of us is a good enough economist that even if we had that information, we'd actually be able to do something that wouldn't screw something up completely. So, I don't really see that there's that much of a need to add more gold sinks to the game. We have insurance. We have a little bit of a gold sink with customizable housing, not as much as it used to be, but a little bit. And insurance, obviously, the big one, especially with the new ML dungeons. Thanks, guys, for your investment. But yeah, I don't feel like there's that much of a need.
Well, moving away from the economy side and onto the housing side, are there any plans to allow L-shapes or keeps or castles to ever be customizable, or to implement new plot sizes, or perhaps as a component of what Sakara was talking about earlier, a temporary housing-like deed that would allow people to implement areas out in the wild, perhaps not in dungeons, but where they could set up sort of a quest event scenario for a player-run plotline?
So there's no plans right now to do any of that stuff. I know that people who have L-shapes and castles and keeps are really unhappy about that, but pragmatically speaking, it's enough of a technical challenge that with the number of people who actually have those types of housing, it's probably not worth our while to do that. And that's, unfortunate, but that's kind of where we are. That time, the time that it would take for us to do that, we could do a lot of other stuff that would impact a much wider array of players. In terms of doing something for events, I think I pretty much have the same answer that I had earlier, which is I'm hearing some really cool ideas about stuff that I haven't really heard from people about player-run events in the past. That could just be ignorance on my part. I'm freely willing to grant you. But yeah, I mean, let's definitely talk about stuff like that. In terms of building houses for events, I don't know. We ran into some problems with Mondane's Legacy, where we'd had EM events in the past, and they built stuff in places where they conflicted with some of the stuff we did for ML. So I'm not sure we'd be looking to expand the scope of that, but certainly there's a happy medium somewhere between where we are now and that we could shoot for.
Well, moving on to skills, what is the possibility of allowing stealables to be put on creatures or bosses again? Thieves have not gotten a lot of love since really Doom. Is there any chance that we could get something on there where they could actually have an active PVM role again?
I don't think that we have plans. So I definitely would like to do something. If we do another big invasion event, I have some thoughts about what that might be, and I have some thoughts about doing some stuff that would be thief-oriented gameplay. But I don't know that that's necessarily going to make them all happy. What they really want is PvP thievery, and that's a really dicey situation, right? Because it goes back to, why do people play in Trammel in the first place, right? Because they don't want to lose their stuff. And we've made stuff so important particularly to PvP now. It's a very difficult situation. I've had some thoughts about how to put PvP thief gameplay back in the game, and I actually mentioned it to a couple people who got really excited about the prospect. So I don't know, maybe that might happen. I don't know what the chances are. I have been asked repeatedly by people to write up the design doc and maybe stick it up on my blog. So maybe I'll do that just as a kind of a way to break the ice and see how people feel about that.
Well, moving back to the Quest system, which was your baby, Shylessa asks, if the sound of the tinny horn when you accept a quest can either be toned down, changed, or in any way modified? Because if you're mulling through quests, it can get quite annoying.
Well, if you go to options and then you go to sound and there's the music volume, I don't know. Yeah, if you're finding that really annoying, then you should bring that to our attention, which I guess you just did. I would email it to the bug address, which I can never remember. I think, and somebody who knows, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's uobugs@owo.com, or is it uo.com? I think it's uobugs@uo.com. Please, by all means, if that's a personal issue for you, just let us know.
That is correct. It is uobugs@uo.com. While we're on the Quest issue, I actually have my own suggestion. I am finding it quite a pain in the butt to sit there and click on each individual quest item to turn it actually into a quest item, especially on some of these crafting quests where, you're making 10, 15, 20 or whatever of a particular item. Is there any way that we could get something perhaps like a secondary backpack that is our questing backpack, where anything that's crafted inside it or is placed inside it becomes a quest item if it's within your quest list, and perhaps even implementing something along the same line for insurance?
That's a really good idea, and I don't think that would be very hard to do. You should definitely send me an email about that.
All right, can do. Moving on, peacemaking. We have a question from Sadie May that there's been a decline in the power of peacemaking for some time. Are there any plans to tweak or nerf that skill any further or to enhance its power?
So I'm not planning to touch it anytime soon. I don't know if any of the other designers are either. As far as that goes, it was really, really powerful for a while there, and I'm sorry if your gameplay was, you were really attached to things just standing there while you killed them. That just didn't seem like fun to us. So that's why it works the way it does now. I mean, especially with really powerful creatures, it seems like they should have a pretty good chance to break out of that stuff over a period of time. As far as that goes, we haven't really done much of anything with taming for a really long time, and if we were going to do anything with taming, I'd like to see us, put some more taming gameplay in, something that was a little different. Maybe something that caused them to not be out there farming stuff all the time and could, play with their pets or something cool like that. I mean, I've talked to a few people who play tamers, and it seems like part of the reason they like playing tamers is because they like having pets, and it seems like it would be kind of cool to put some fun gameplay in there, fetch or something like that.
All right. Moving on to some of the other new ML content, Wendy Weaver would like to know if there's a possibility of allowing fish tanks to be folded up like vendors instead of having to kill your fish or pay zillions to put them in bowls if you recustomize the house.
Yeah, that seems like it would be kind of nice, wouldn't it? So I didn't really have a lot of involvement in the development of the fish tank, so I'm not the person to properly ask. But, that does seem like it would be a great convenience to do that. So certainly, again, that's a good one to send to the bug email list. Sorry, people who read the bug email list, you're just about to get like 8,000 bug emails. So my apologies.
Colleen would like to know why it was decided to go with elves as opposed to gargoyles or another race for UO Mundane's Legacy.
Again, I was not really involved in that discussion, so I really can't answer that question. Sorry. DJ Deadeye from our own home here at UO Radio would like to know if you or any of the other dev team members are working on anything specifically to prevent scripting within the game. Like right now? No. In general, all right, so let's expand the scope of right now. We have talked about a lot of things. It's a much harder problem to solve than most people seem to realize. And so at the moment, we are pretty much relying on the GMs to police it. It is something that we talk about perennially, however. And whether we're actually going to do something programmatically, like with Punkbuster or something like that, I really can't say. Especially because now I'm doing more design work and I'm less involved in that side of things than I was. But I honestly don't know. Sorry.
Arcane states that recently we have seen voices in the game, talking mirrors and whatnot, where we're actually getting some vocal interactivity. Are there any plans to expand on this further, perhaps allowing spells to have a vocal effect as well? Anything along those lines?
Don't some of them already? I know that when you cast certain necro spells, you hear some chanting. Anyway, so putting more voice in the game. So that was the first time that any of us have done any of that. That was quite the educational experience, let me tell you. And it was a little hard to do, particularly when dealing with, we used an outside sound resource to do all the recording and stuff, and not having somebody who's a sound engineer right on the team makes it a bit more challenging. I don't know if we'll do any more voice stuff, honestly. It was fun to do, but it was a lot of work. And I know because I did most of it. Actually getting the sounds into the game and getting them formatted correctly and all that stuff. I think it would be cool. I think it would make the game much more immersive and more interactive and fun. I think there's definitely some cool stuff there. Oh, by the way, while we're on the subject of the evil furniture, I want to reiterate you guys have not found the Easter egg yet, so get cracking. But yeah, so I think it would be really cool, but the scope of work that's involved is pretty vast. We might do it again in the future on a sort of one-off basis, kind of like we did with the evil furniture, where it makes sense to do it. But in terms of like giving all the NPCs things to say, not so much.
Are we ever going to see a move back to the more colorful text from the NPCs, or perhaps even tying into some of the historical Ultima lore? For example, Aklo has its own separate culture that is pretty much completely ignored by the NPCs within it.
Yeah, that's actually something we've talked about quite a bit, and we're all sort of frustrated by that. There was an issue with the Tillerman for a while there where we put the Tillerman speech back in. We were trying to fix a bug, if you remember correctly, and we put the Tillerman speech back in, and everybody loved it. We were all so excited. And the problem, of course, was that they ripped all that conversation stuff out when it got localized, when the game got localized, which honestly I think was not a good idea. Not to disparage the people who came before me on this project, but it's, it's so cool. We've actually had it working on occasion internally, and it's really cool. So yeah, we'd love to get that system working again, get it localized, and have it. But when we're going to do that, I don't know. It's not on the schedule right now. Yada yada yada.
Well, speaking of what came before, Erilyn asks. She says that the original UO artists were apparently the best, seeing as all of the original pre-AOS art is the best art that is currently existing within the game. That's her opinion, mind you. Not that I don't agree in a large part. What she'd like to know is what happened to those original UO artists? Why can't we rehire them? As one player wants to know, why are the current artworks of such shoddy quality as compared to the earlier works?
Yeah, and that's one of those questions like, are you still beating your wife? Honestly, again, it kind of harkens back to it's a complex process. It's been made more complex over the years, so that maybe that's part of the situation. Is that the job of the artist on UO nowadays is a lot harder than the job was back in the day, because you have to build art for two different clients and so on and so forth. Also the fact that at some point in the nebulous past, a lot of the original artwork was lost. So when we wanted to get in and start doing new artwork, we didn't even have that stuff to use as a template. It's a big question. There's a lot of complex facets to the response. I'm sorry you don't like the new art. I'm not an artist, so I can't really do much about it, unfortunately. I do want to say, I think obviously we're hearing your concerns and that we're trying very, very hard to get better at making the art look good and making the game look good. And that's about as far as I can go with that answer before I'm reduced to complete groveling. So there you go.
Kickin would like to know what the possibilities are of adding vendor carts in the cities. For example, the ability to rent a cart to sell items in cities like a vendor would, placed along the roads or somewhere, whatnot, where you wouldn't have to stand there and spam. Just set it up, leave it, and in 24 hours, if they haven't sold, they automatically go back to your bank account.
That's an interesting idea. I think if we were going to do something like that, something to change the way that you bought stuff from vendors, I would much rather do something that's a little bit more... I mentioned earlier I have some concerns about the way that the interface with vendors works, because it's so hard to find something you're looking for. You have to rely on the guy labeling the vendor correctly, and then you hope that he labeled the bag that has the thing in it that you want, right? And then you have to click through to the bag and mouse over all the individual items to see if the particular one that you want, if you're looking for a particular property, and it's the right color and whatnot. It would be really cool if you had a way to kind of scan all the vendors that were around and, maybe put in criteria and go, hey, tell me what vendors have these items. And I would much rather invest some effort into building an interface like that than, finding new ways for people to place vendors in more populous or more heavily trafficked areas. Because they're heavily trafficked now and they get a lot of people and they're kind of laggy because they get so many people, and I would rather not add stuff to that's going to make it worse. I'd actually like to make the problem better.
Is the design desire to move into that particular phase in any way inspired by some of these trade and marketing programs that are attempting to do exactly that?
Okay, so you remember how earlier I said that we're pretty much aware of everything that goes on in the UO universe? Maybe that was before the actual interview. Yeah, that's not something I'm actually aware of. But yeah, it seems certainly, if what you're saying is that there are players out there writing sort of unsupported third-party applications that do things like, record everything that's on people's vendors, then yeah, that's the kind of thing we're talking about doing.
I know for a fact one of the writers has applied for a job with you guys, so you might want to look at him. Moving on to the next question. Sir Dingo would like to know, have there been any expansions or content that have been added to the game that you think weren't the right path or were released too quickly?
Again, with the "Are you still beating your wife?" Yeah, obviously I have my own personal opinions about things, but out of respect for the people who work on the product, I don't think it's really appropriate for me to tell you what all of those are, because, quite honestly, I can rant all the livelong day about a particular issue, and God knows, you get a couple beers in me, I'm prone to do so, but we're all working under certain constraints here, right? This is the thing you have to realize. It's not like we're given an unlimited budget and an unlimited amount of time and go and make the most fantastic, amazing, beautiful thing that you can. It's here, you have X number of days and you have X number of people, and oh, by the way, some of those people have experience with the product and some of them don't, and so you're going to have to teach them how to make content for the game, and you do the best you can given what the resources are that you have. It's no different than any other company in the industry, with the sole exception of maybe Blizzard. And I'd like to point out that Blizzard shipped 2 titles in the entire lifespan of UO. No, that's not quite right. They've shipped a couple more than that. So that's, talk smack about them and get my butt kicked later. But yeah, so here's the thing. It's a choice about how you want to run your business, right? You can choose to spend lots of time and lots of resources and only release a few products and make sure that those products are just stellar, or you can choose to have a finite amount of time and ship the best product you can in that time. And I'm not at a level where I can make that decision. It's pretty much what it boils down to. So I can't tell you why they make that decision. That's what happens. I'm just a grunt. There you go.
Well, speaking from your own personal experience and desires, Muldrin of Europa would like to know, where do you see Ultima Online moving and growing to over the next few years? And I'd like to refine that myself on a more micro scale. What do you see over the next few publishes as your direct intention as a member of the live team? So we have the macro scale of where do you see UO growing and moving to, and the micro of where do you in your own particular little niche see yourself working and addressing the attention towards?
So let me answer the second question first, actually, because the next few publishes you're going to see are going to be pretty tactical. Obviously, we're going to work to fix any issues that arose from the expansion. That's pretty much our standard operating procedure. We've got a couple of other little things that are coming along that are things that you would not be terribly surprised by, so let's leave it at that. I can't really tell you what's going on with that stuff. And then we have a goal to make some improvements to our client. I don't think that they're going to be, anything of colossal scope or anything, but, lots of little things on the order of fixing the radar map, kind of stuff like that. Things that are out there that would be pretty low-hanging fruit for us, and it's well past time that we addressed them. Party bars, the thing that people are perennially complaining about. Hopefully we're going to get those fixed sometime this year. So from a near-term standpoint, that's what we're looking at. From a bigger picture, I kind of answered this question earlier. It's hard to say because UO is such a big product. There's such a diverse array of people who love playing it. I do definitely still think we're going to be around for a few more years. And I think we're going to continue to try and improve the game in a way that makes the community happy. That's a really ambiguous answer, but I think anything that I tried to predict that was more detailed than that would be just tempting fate. I want us to fix some of the big glaring issues with the game that drive people nuts, because they drive me nuts too. Like the PvP balance being completely off at the moment, stuff like that. It'd be great to be able to get in the game and play an archer and know that I didn't have a substantial advantage over a mage or a dexter or a bard or whatever. So fixing fundamental things, trying to do new fun content. That's pretty much where we're at.
You've spoken about missing some of the developers that have moved on from the UO team, but has the actual mood of the studio changed from that of the Austin office when you were a true Originite?
Yeah, it's a definite culture shift. And honestly, I got to say, I think that that's part of the reason why some of the people who came out here with us from Austin chose not to stay. It's a different environment. You've got people who are coming from different development experiences and things, and it's, and I'll say this, it's kind of expensive to live here. So, what are you going to do? It's a different world, definitely. A lot more focused on certain aspects of the development process than we used to be at Origin, which I think is really to our benefit in some ways. I don't know. It's yeah. There you go.
Well, to wrap up here, Masara, one of the event moderators for Sonoma, would like to know if MrTact, can I have your robe?
But that would leave me walking around naked, so no. Because you just don't want to see that.
Well, that actually takes us right into our next question from Ryu. Boxers or briefs?
Boxer briefs, actually. How's that for the safety answer?
Truly walking the middle of the line. And that's all we have for our IRC questions, so we'll pass this back over to Sakara, and we'll wrap up for the interview.
Yes, actually, Sakara does have one last question for you, MrTact. And this one is somewhat concerning the rares and the various items that used to be true rares in-game, and that over the few, I guess, expansions that we've received, a lot of them have stopped being rares and become common items. I know that this upsets a lot of the rare collectioners community. I used to be part of it myself, but I kind of gave up after Blackthorn's Revenge. When you have one item that one moment was worth like so many mil, and overnight you can buy it for 3 gold pieces. A number of people were upset over the basically every player being able now to ride ethereal horses. I have mixed feelings about that, but is this something that people should expect? Should people not really expect to hold on to old server birth rares and other such items, and just basically consider an item is an item that at any point in time can just become a common item? Or do you guys actually take that into consideration before you make an item common?
So I do think we think about that sometimes. There's a little conflict here, right? On the one hand, these items were rare, so the whole concept of rares was a bug in the first place. Just FYI, I don't know if you guys realize this. So like, dynamically created objects, they're not part of the map. They're created by a configuration file, right? And sometimes people would forget to put the stuff on them that would prevent you from taking them. And so, from that perspective, is it really something that we should exploit? On the other hand, a lot of players really enjoy the rare stuff, and I personally definitely think that it's something that we should take into consideration. It's something we thought about when we were doing, for example, the Takuno pigments. If I remember correctly, I made it so you couldn't dye lampposts because there was a rare lamppost, if I remember correctly. But so, this is obviously consideration for us. We obviously, so taking people's fun away, not really conducive to running a successful game service. So in general, we like to try to not do that. On the other hand, so I mentioned it's a conflict, right? It's a conflict of interest here. You and I were talking before the interview about the rehues, and I think we're all in agreement to our universal loathing of rehues, particularly given that the hewing in our game client is so egregious. But so if we have an opportunity to put an item into the game and use art that's already in there, so we don't even have to patch out the art to you, that's a tough decision to make. We've already got the art for this. We can't create new art because we don't have a budget for it, or because we don't have an art resource available, or what have you. And so should we choose not to introduce the item, using the existing art that's in the game because there's one that is stealable or can be picked up or what have you. I think that in general we're going to try very hard. We have art resources for the most part for a lot of the new stuff that we're doing, right? So we're going to try and respect the legacy of the items that were introduced inadvertently. We're certainly going to try and respect the deliberate rares that we've introduced since Doom. And, as far as that goes, I think that's the whole point that I meant to make. I think I ran out of thoughts before I stopped talking. Sorry. So the answer is our intent is to try and respect that legacy and not screw you guys over if we can possibly avoid it.
Well, that's fair enough. Though I do have one question. Oh, God, now I'm trying to remember what the English word is. God, that thingy that I think every single female in this game has wanted forever and ever and ever and ever, and it's that, it goes in your bedroom.
A wedding ring?
A wedding. Well, that would be nice to get those back. But no, I meant that piece of furniture that goes in the bedroom and has a mirror. God, how do you call that again?
Now I can't think of it.
A vanity. It's not a vanity. It's
a vanity is more like for your bathroom.
Yeah, it's
like a bureau or a dresser or something like that.
Yeah, it's like a dresser, and it has the little desk in front, the little bench with it, and whatever. We see in quite a number of houses already, NPC houses, and we've been drooling over one of those forever. And
you want us to make one that's craftable?
Craftable or obtainable, make it a drop as as loot, or have it. Like he was mentioning, if you ever consider putting back the stealing for on monsters, that would be really, really nice, actually. Make it on some unkillable monster like, the Balron Paragon, or even on one of the bosses, whatever, make it stealable on them so that the thief has to be working with a team. And, there could be some very, very nifty piece of decoration that people could get off, stealing from high-end monsters.
Well, I had no idea. I had no idea that there was this great demand for these things out there. So certainly now I'm going to have to look into that. But and also, we talked about the PVM Thief gameplay earlier as well. So I will definitely keep that in mind.
Goody. I think Viceroy wants to ask you a question. Go ahead, Vice.
Actually, I don't want a question. I just want to give a little idea as to what else they could put on it. If you guys so happen, maybe 6 months later on down the road, decide to change out the community collection items or rewards, you could have something to replace it with, and this would be one example of what y'all could probably replace it with, which would give the old reward some rarity and actually make it rare, because and then it would actually give more people an incentive to get out there quickly to go ahead and fulfill and complete these community collection things. I think it would actually encourage people to get out there and pour a lot more into it if they knew it was going to become rare maybe 6 months from now or something like that.
All right, cool. I'll definitely take that under advisement.
Well, I think that actually wraps it up for me too. Well, yes and no. I think we would probably go on asking you questions forever and ever and ever and ever, but we have already been hogging you for the past almost 3 hours, as a matter of fact, since it's already 7:30. But I really do want to thank you very much, not only on my behalf, but on behalf of the entire YoRadio.com team and the players who had a chance to ask you all these questions. We will have to try and drag you on over once again, once more down the road to give you some more of the third degree, and hopefully we weren't too brutal with you today.
I not too bad. There were a few where I was going, oh, I better shut up now before I get fired. But yeah, definitely I had a great time, and I'd be happy to do it again. So just let me know.
We definitely will. I don't know if you want to say a little something to all the people listening out there before we say goodbye.
I do actually. It's not necessarily to all the people. I want to say thank you to the Syndicate for hosting their con this upcoming weekend, which I will be at with Wilkie. That's out in Myrtle Beach. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun. So I'll get to answer all these questions all over again.
You definitely will. But gee, that's cool. For I didn't even know that they were holding that this weekend. So I have a feeling now that you put it out there that they're going to have even more people. So they can thank you for that one. So once again, thank you very, very, very much. We had a grand old time, and this was an interview with MrTact, designer engineer with Origin Electronic Arts. So thank you once again, and goodbye, everybody. We will be seeing you again throughout the week for our various other music shows and for our community interviews on Fridays and Sundays from 5 p.m. Eastern to 7 p.m. Eastern. So thanks again, everyone, and goodbye. Go ahead and
Thank you.
All right, sorry. I thought Mr. Jack wanted to say something. Yeah. So thanks again to Vanitas, and thank you, Viceroy, and thank you, MrTact. Good night, everybody.